Welcome back to Newsday. Well, Mal Brough is the Special Minister of State in this new Turnbull government, and he set chins wagging last week, I should say, after he suggested that he wanted to pursue Senate reforms this side of an election. Well, a lot of the crossbenchers were pretty unhappy about that, a few even declaring war over that sentiment. Since then, I think the government has wound that back a little. But where is Senate reform? What do we need to look at? And should there be Senate reform? I'm joined now by Liberal Democrat David Leyonhjelm here in the studio. Senator, thanks so much for your time. We've just heard from Richard Di Natale at the Press Club, and he makes the point that at the moment, the way the system is set up is that you can vote for example, a pro-climate change party. And with the myriad of preference deals done, you could end up giving your vote to an anti-climate change party. There's something wrong with the system if that can happen.
Well, no, it depends what you think is wrong about that. It may be that on other issues you prefer an anti-climate change party. The system's not been any different since 1985. It was the same system that led to Bob Brown being elected to the Senate for the first time in Tasmania. He wouldn't have been elected if we'd had the optional preferential voting above the line, which is what the Greens favour. But the Democrats' preferences went to the Greens and got him across the line ahead of Labor. And that was the beginning of the Greens getting into the federal parliament, and we now know, as we now know, they've got 10 senators. So the system depends on what you want. Do you want to keep out your opposition? If that's the case, you will go a certain way. If you want it to be representative of the broad spectrum of opinion, then you'll go another way.
Well, Senator, you would agree, though, that there would be a lot of voters out there who wouldn't realise or don't understand how this preferential system works. And if they were going to, vote for a pro-party on climate change, a lot of them wouldn't expect their vote to end up, on the other side of the spectrum. Do you at least concede that?
Yes, although that information has always been available, but a little bit inaccessible via the Electoral Commission website. I think there's an easy compromise on that. The problem is you can direct your preferences now by voting below the line, but only about 3% of the voters do that. The reason being that you have to number every square. Now, I think that's probably a bit onerous, and most people don't want to do that. But voting below the line is the way to direct your preferences. So if you only had to vote, say, a minimum of 6, because that's how many candidates have to be elected in a state, and then you could go on after that if you wanted to, so as many as you like, up to the maximum number, or just stop at 6 if you wanted. That would then give people who are concerned about the fact that their preferences might end up in a place they don't like an option for voting below the line, which isn't so onerous.
So are you offering this up as a bit of a compromise to the government? Will you put this to Mal Brough? Have you met with him over the last week or so?
I haven't met with Mal since he made his public statements, which I disagreed with, because I interpreted his statements as saying he was supporting the abolition of group voting tickets, which is the one above the line.
And he said that he hasn't?
He said that's not what his intention? He said that's not what he had in mind.
Okay.
Whether he did at the beginning and changed during the day or not, I don't know. But I was reassured by both the Prime Minister and Matthias Cormann, the Finance Minister, that that's not what the intention of the government was. So, but I mean, it's not as if we couldn't tweak the Senate voting system a bit to ensure that it was a little more representative. I don't think there's an issue with that. And optional, preferential voting below the line, but no need to fill in every box, seems to me to be a reasonable compromise. You could then have those who don't mind the fact that the party decides where their preferences go, voting one above the line, as you can do now, and those who do care, who don't trust the party to direct their preferences, they can vote below the line, but only a minimum of 6, and then no maximum.
Okay, so this could be a compromise, perhaps this side of the election. We'll keep on talking to you about this over the coming months as well, and see where the government ends up on this, and some of the other crossbenchers as well. But can I ask you about the development in Canberra today, of all places? Uber will be legalised within the next month. Now, you've said that this is showing New South Wales government ministers to be, I think, banjo-playing yokels, if I'm not misquoting you. So, I mean, if the ACT's been able to do this and with a bit of an olive branch to the taxi industry by lowering its rates as well. Is there any reason why this couldn't be done in other states?
There's no reason at all. But what this does show, though, is one of the benefits of competitive federalism. When the states and territories are competing with each other, and we work out who has got the best policies. Now, my guess is the state or territory with the best policies will be the one that has the least amount of regulation, doesn't hold back an industry. So if they want to regulate the taxi industries to the point where it encourages a competitor like Uber, then obviously Uber will come up whether it's regulated or not. Uber will compete. The problem is the taxi industry has been excessively regulated. The cost of transport's gone up. Uber comes in, offers a cheaper, more convenient alternative, and the entrenched, market dominators scream their heads off. Now, what's the appropriate regulatory response? The right one, in my view, is the ACT saying, let's level the playing field and let Uber compete. New South Wales, their attitude is, let's book the Uber drivers and take them off the road. I think that's the wrong way to go.
And in an environment where in the previous months we have been talking about the expenses of politicians and expenditure review, you've also pushed for Parliament or for parliamentarians to be able to use this Uber service. Are you making much progress in that space?
I've got some, there are some supporters in high places in the government who like Uber and they use it themselves. And I think...
Well, Joe Hockey even said he used Uber when he went to Washington on one of his trips.
At the risk of causing grief, Matthias Cormann told me the same thing too. He used Uber. He likes Uber, he's told me. But the problem is that if we're on official business, on parliamentary electorate business, the most efficient way to do it is by charging it to our cab charge. And that just gets onto our accounts. If we use Uber, there's no easy way to do it. It has to go onto your credit card, then you have to claim it back again, and it's a whole lot of paperwork and nobody likes it. If there was an equivalent to cab charge for Uber, I think we'd all be using it, and it would save the taxpayer money too.
We'll keep across that one as well. Just finally, if I can ask you, Malcolm Turnbull, new Prime Minister, I'm sure you didn't miss it in the last 2 weeks or so. He's been described, and I think he is a moderate Liberal. Some of his more conservative colleagues are concerned about where he might take social policy. But as a Liberal Democrat, where do you see Malcolm Turnbull in the political spectrum? Yeah,
it's funny. Some people are calling him a leftie. Now, and that's bad. Those people who are saying it are assuming that being a lefty is bad. I don't think he's a lefty at all. I think he's closer to a libertarian point of view. And I'm not a lefty, but I have liberal views on social issues. So same-sex marriage, for example, and prohibition of various things, drugs and whatnot.
Is there any conversations you've had with him in the last couple of weeks that might make you think that, or his views on particular policies?
He did say to me he was fairly sure that his views were closer to mine than his predecessors, and we've discussed that. I mean, I've chatted to Malcolm quite a few times, really, and my impression is that there are a few areas where I don't necessarily agree with what he used to say in the past, in 2009, but as far as I can tell, he is in the small L Liberal category, as am I. That's classical Liberal, and it's nothing to fear. If he also does what he says he's going to do on the economy, for example, convincing the Australian public that we do have a problem, that we do need to balance our budget, live within our means, that we have a spending problem, not a revenue problem, he'll be my hero. Well, almost.
Well, quote unquote, David Leyonhjelm, thanks so much for joining us on Newsday. We'll speak to you shortly.
My pleasure.
Two of Australia's